All right. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all virtually in your rooms. Now you know what your rooms look like. Hi. So, um, this is Mike Avitabile, the flutist and the founder and executive director of Hub New Music, who was supposed to be here this week with Kojiro Mezaki, shakuhachi player. They're still planning on doing a recording session sometime later this year once this all dies down. But in the meantime, he's offered to present a little workshop that he's done around the country at various universities that he's presented at on interacting with performers, what you can do as a composer uh, to have the best chance of success at getting in touch with performers like Mike. And he's prepared a nice little slideshow. Hopefully you can all see it on your computers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Mike, or please give your warm round of applause to Mike. Yay.
The stage is mine. Hi, everyone. Takuma, thank you for having me digitally. We studied in Hawaii the last 15 have their plans for us. So I am chatting with you all from Boston, where it snowed very heavily today. So this is especially depressing that I'm not in Hawaii right now. But I am really excited to talk to all of you. So the talk that I'm going to present with you guys today is on composer-performer collaboration. I just got an unstable connection thing. Can I, thumbs up, thumbs down? Good? Takuma, am I good?
The audio is okay.
Okay,
it's going in and out.
Audio is okay. Okay, it's a little in and out. Okay, so if I, can someone just kind of give me like one of these or something if I cut it out? Okay, cool. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about how our organization, Hub New Music, works with composers to commission new work, what that looks like from the very beginning of the process when you're first reaching out to a performer, or you're even creating a website and generating materials for yourself, all the way down to what it looks like to create a commission agreement, fundraising for a piece, and all of the kind of business-related contractual details that are also important when working with an ensemble to commission a new piece of music. So if we go to slide number 2, I'm going to talk about, I have 4 different components to this lecture. And since we have about an hour, I'm going to brush through these relatively quickly so that way we have enough time at the end for questions. Because it seems QA is always my favorite part of doing this. So we're going to talk about building an effective press kit. So what a good website looks like, bio, materials, list of pieces, how we can make that all nice and clean and tidy so that way it is the most effective means of digital communication with your performers. Talk about reaching out to performers of what are the best tactics if you do have to do a kind of cold call to a performer, if you're going to be sending scores, or if you're going to be reaching out about a commission project with an ensemble who you might be kind of crushing on and want to work with. We're going to talk about working with performers. So when we kind of get past that initial get to know you stage, you've snared your performers, they commissioned you, they're playing your music. How do we make that relationship the most productive, positive thing that we can? And lastly, the commissioning process itself, the nitty-gritty details of fundraising, what a commission agreement looks like, what a good contract is, what a good contract is not. And at the end, we'll have time for questions. So let's dive in. Normally with this, I like to ask a lot of questions to the floor, but so I'm not like talking at you for so long, but that might be difficult. So I guess I'm going to kind of talk at you and leave more time for questions at the end, so that's okay. So the artist bio, and your website. So your website is essentially your press kit, right? It is the way that most performers and most commissioners of new work are going to engage with you, right? You may have a personal relationship, you may not, but ultimately they're going to be coming back to some kind of a website press kit, something that houses all the information about you. And one of the components of a good website that I go to first when we're looking at a composer, we're interested in commissioning, is actually the artist bio. And so I want to talk very briefly about what makes compelling artist bio, what are the components of something that's effective, and maybe what is something that maybe is slightly less effective as an artist bio. For me, an artist bio, especially that initial paragraph, that first impression that we're going to get of you as a composer, is all about an artistic statement. So often you'll see bios that are essentially a kind of written out resume. They're kind of a list, blow by blow, of accomplishments, which are great to feature. But often a commissioner, when they're looking at working with a composer, they're thinking very artistically about where your music, where this existing piece of work, where this new commission, how is that going to fit into the concept of what an ensemble does, of a particular commissioning project or program that they're creating. And so I encourage, when writing a bio, that first paragraph, that artistic statement, is to look at what drives you as an artist. And if we go to the next slide, I have two sample bios of two composers who we actually have both commissioned by this point, whose bios I find really compelling. In addition to having very long lists of achievements and commissions and accomplishments, these first paragraphs give me a sense of what this composer is doing, what drives him or her, and how they would fit into our programming. So if we look at this really quickly, we'll just kind of skim through this. New York-based composer named person writes music characterized by an acute sensitivity to tone color manifested in aural images of vibrant, arresting immediacy. We talk about working in the electronic music studio, talking about a variety of influences in the classical canon, modernism, etc., and often challenge stylistic boundaries, auditory perception, and whatnot. So for this particular composer, whose music I've known for quite some time, this kind of summarizes the breadth of influence, the dedication to electronic music, the idea of creating large-scale oral experiences. And so in deciding to work with this person, we approached this person with the desire to do a large-scale electronic project in which something that's going to be like very spatial, very kind of atmospheric in a way. And this particular bio shows me that this composer is someone who would be the right fit for a particular project. If we go to the next slide with another bio that I find really compelling, who's also a good friend and someone who we've commissioned. This is a bit shorter, but also gets to the point of person is internationally acclaimed for compositions characterized by a subtle handling of timbre and resonance, deep literary fluency, and a flair for multimedia collaborations. And so in seeing something like this, especially subtle handling of timbre, flair for multimedia collaboration, helped me decide to match this particular composer with a project that we're doing that's entirely inspired by visual art, by abstract visual art. So knowing that I'm looking for someone who has an interest in multimedia collaboration, someone who feels like they have real strength in handling tone color and timbre and texture, just struck me as a way to pair a bio with a project or an artistic idea. So if that makes sense, right? So if we go back, I want to talk a little bit more about what else goes on a good website for a composer. And normally this is when I would kind of have it out to the floor to get your opinions on what goes in, but I'm just going to kind of give you a quick rundown of what we look for and what we find effective when going through a composer's website. a list of pieces, obviously, that you are happy to have performed, so things that you're not kind of withdrawn or still editing. And those should be structured by the size of the ensemble. So they should be organized by orchestral, large ensemble, chamber music, and solo duo. Within that, you should include subcategories. So if you, for example, write a lot of string quartets, all your string quartets should be lumped together, all of your woodwind quintets, your orchestra pieces, large ensemble, if it's like a 10 to 15 person ensemble, 15 to 20, because the commissioner, if they're, say, a chamber music ensemble like me, I'm going to be most interested in listening to probably works for string quartet, works that feature woodwinds, any kind of mixed ensemble work, and I'm probably going to be listening less to orchestral, choral, opera, and more so what I'm looking to commission. And so when your catalog is organized in a convenient way, it makes sifting through your recordings for the person who's going to commission you or fund you a little bit easier. Something to think about. Make recordings readily available, and always invest in high quality recordings when possible, because a performance or a piece could be really stellar, but I will say that over the years of just listening to recordings constantly by composers, if someone sends me a kind of low quality recording, it does just kind of subconsciously plant something in your head about that. So invest in high quality recordings, video materials if you can, also high quality headshots. You don't need to have like a major New York City magazine to your headshots, but something that isn't also an iPhone selfie is ideal. So talk about, or Tom, do we have anything that we want to like add to that? Anything I've missed?
Let's see. I mean, I think what you emphasized about how the kinds of concerts that you organize, it's not just your regular university composers workshop where you're just presenting works that you're receiving and just playing all of that, whatever you get. A lot of your concerts are themed. They have these themes. Orchestra concerts, if you've noticed, they have titles on most of them, whether it's Tchaikovsky or whatever. It has, they like having themes. Especially like wind ensemble concerts, they will usually almost always have a theme that ties together all the works. So that's something I didn't realize until fairly recently, that these themes are what a lot of these concert organizers, conductors, artistic directors really care about. And so they're often looking for titles, music that even though they could be completely abstract, if you name it a certain way, has a greater chance of just being included in one type of concert over another. And
Right.
you don't necessarily need to title your piece to be the most marketable. You never know what these concert organizers are looking to bring in, but yeah, I've had a piece that was called Event Horizon about the black hole, and this concert was about involving space themes. So they decided to involve program that piece, even though it really has nothing all that much to do sonically with space. But, so yeah, just keep that in mind.
And just one like final, just little caveat about, you know, writing a bio and writing an artistic statement, which is something you're going to have to do as a composer quite often, whether it's for a grant application or if you're applying for a job, a teaching job. I've been talking about this a lot this week. I've been doing a lot of consulting this week. And the concept we keep coming back to in all my consulting sessions is the idea is that
Mike, can't hear you.
telling a story
Okay.
about.
Mike, we just missed like 30 seconds of what you just said.
Okay, so when we talk about marketing materials, what I've been talking a lot about in my consulting sessions this week is that essentially what you're doing is telling a story about the work that you do. And that ties into the idea that Takuma was mentioning about thematic programming, because the curator of a concert is also trying to tell a story. And when we're working with all of these different stories, these different narratives, that's how we create compelling programming and how we develop strong artistic relationships. So moving on, so reaching out to performers, you have this performer, this string quartet, this wind ensemble that you have like kind of a crush on and you really want to work with them. So there are some do's and don'ts. And all of these are from experience, especially the don'ts. People always roll their eyes when I do the don'ts, but I've had all of these happen to me, so they are real. So the do's, if you have to, say, reach out cold call style in an email, kind of scary, right? Kind of impersonal. How do we take, say, a cold call pitch to some ensemble that you really want to work with, and how do we make it a little more personal? So what I like to talk about is these 4 bullet points of what the do's are. And the first one I want to talk about is know the mission of the performer, right? So if we have this performer who you really, really want to work with, get to know them a little bit. Look at their stuff. Look at their concerts. Look at their programming. Again, coming back to this idea of thematically designed programs. Are they doing a large-scale commissioning project? Say, is a string quartet commissioning a companion piece to every Beethoven quartet for the next 10 years? Is that a project you would want to be part of? Speak to that. How would you be able to do that? If you see some composers on their programming who you find quite influential, do you feel that you can write something that would fit well into their existing work? Just start a discussion from the basis of wanting to create a compelling artistic collaboration and not, please give me money to write you a piece, okay, bye. That usually doesn't work. Talking about why you would be a good fit, we kind of touched upon that. What about your work is a good match for an ensemble? Or maybe the exact opposite. Maybe you're offering something that is a radical point of departure for them, but you feel like you just are so drawn to them artistically that you want to work together. Point 3, engage with them in person if possible. So if they have a concert in your area, go. And then go backstage or go and meet them after the concert. Hub, prior to COVID-19, played a lot of concerts. And many of the people in attendance at our concerts will be, hopefully, composers. And often those composers will come up to us and, talk to us about what they liked in the program. I've had like just the largest slurry of compliments ever about your piece. Like everybody everywhere we go loves it. So he's really good, guys. So listen to him when he teaches you things. But often composers will follow up with us about a project that they want to do together or sending us some scores. And, I always remember people if they come up to me and they, shake my hand or don't shake hands now. If they engage with us after a concert and then follow up with me, it's so much more compelling and humanizing than just sending a cold call email. I tend to not really value those if they're really cold call-y. And the last point is the NICO model. So by a show of hands, and I'm going to scroll through this so I can see your hands. Has anyone here watched or listened to the podcast Meet the Composer, the one that Nadia Sirota does? Looking, any hands? Tom, okay, teacher knows. Anyone? Meet the Composer. This is, some of you are blacked out, so I can't see if you're raising your hands. Anyway, it's a fabulous podcast that I recommend that you all go listen to if you need some. If you suddenly have a lot of free time in your hands because everything has been canceled, now's the time to listen to this podcast. And so Nadia sort of interviews a bunch of composers, and she's very friends with Nico Muhly. And Nico was talking about how in his early days as a composer, he only wrote for his friends. And why did he do that? Because, yes, it is called Meet the Composer. Yes, with Nadia Sirota on WQXR in New York. I'll send the link to Takuma and he can forward it to you. And so Nico saying he only plays music by his friends because his friends are going to play it over and over and over and over again. For example, to prove why this model is effective, Takuma, are we friends? Can we get that one? No. This is heartbreaking. Okay,
Sorry?
Takuma and I are friends.
Are you
We're
sure?
friends. Well, at least we were. And Takuma wrote this lovely piece for us, and we tore it all over, and we play it all the time because we like him, we like working with him, we have a personal connection to the piece. At least I thought we had a personal connection. And then conversely, the don'ts are not surprisingly the opposite of the do's. So the don'ts are, don't send a generic cut and paste email to a performer and expect them to commission you, because if I see like a cut and paste email, I tend to like skim it through once and I probably delete it because there's no connection, there's nothing artistically compelling about someone who sent me a link to their bio, regardless of how good it is, without any kind of like tailored interest in me as a performer. And also, don't send work that is not relevant to an ensemble. So I swear I've had this. If the ensemble is mine and it's a quartet of flute, clarinet, violoncello, please don't send me scores for solo trombone pieces and expect me to program them. I kid you not, it has happened. Just goes back to research the group, research the ensemble, know who you're working with. Next, so working with performer. So we'll go through this one pretty quickly. So some things to think about when you're, especially in a rehearsal process with performers who are there and very excited to play your music. When you have a commission, we very far in advance, we schedule rehearsal and workshop time. So usually, depending on the composer, about halfway, 3/4 through their writing process, we will ask them when they want to workshop with us so they can send us some drafts, some scores of what they're working on, hear things, they record it, go back to their composer laboratory so they have, just some kind of FaceTime with us before the piece is actually due. And then we'll often schedule a few rehearsals with them leading up to the premiere. Do not, please, composers of the world, do not insist on going to an ensemble's first rehearsal. Don't even go to the second rehearsal. Don't do it. And we always joke that you can't come to the first rehearsal because that's when we're complaining about your piece the whole time and you don't hear that. So the third rehearsal until we have some time to get to know it before you start working with us on it. Deadlines. Do your very, very, very best to honor your deadlines. The caveat that I come back to a lot with deadlines is that as the performer, our deadline does not move. It's the day that we walk on stage and play your piece. And so when we do that, depending how much time we've had with it and how much preparation we've had, we're going to feel really great about it, or we're not going to feel really great about it, but that day does not move. So if your piece is due a certain day, do your absolute best to get it in on time. And if it's not going to be on time, which happens, that's life, send something. If you have 2 out of 3 movements done, send those movements. If you have 3/4 of a single movement work done, send the completed bars. Just say we have something to kind of noodle with and work on, because sometimes the composer send things late and they don't think it's hard, but it actually is really hard. Is my microphone, oh crap.
Yeah, you're back now. We missed about half a minute.
Half a minute, okay, so, God, what did I just say? Deadlines, honor them, send music if you have it, send drafts, send stuff, so we have stuff to practice. Is that, okay, good. When you're in a rehearsal with the ensemble, I want to talk about a little bit about technical versus musical details, right? So in a rehearsal, try to offer something that the performers would not know, in your absence, right? So for example, if in bar 4, I epically screwed up the really hard lick, you don't need to tell me that. I'm fully aware that I screwed up the really hard lick. What I don't know is what about this particular section? What was the inspiration behind this section? How does the material relate to other sections of the piece that are maybe not obvious to me? Like when I'm working with you, when the ensemble is working with you, we want like kind of the inner workings of the composer's brain. We will beat ourselves up a lot about playing out of tune and not playing together and playing wrong notes, but we've got that one covered. So we want the real juicy artistic details. Last thing, if you are, while you're all in school, I would highly suggest you take a conducting class. If in the event you are working with a large ensemble that is conducted and you do have to maybe lead a rehearsal or demonstrate something from the podium. Our violinist Alyssa is also a conductor, so she speaks to this a lot better than I do, but if you are going to get on the podium, always ask the conductor first if it's okay, and ask them before the rehearsal, so that way it's not awkward. Next section, the commissioning process. Okay, so the money part that we all have questions about because it's scary. How do we take this great project, what we're working on, and how do we create a commission agreement, and how do we make the money dollars for a new piece of music happen? So let's talk a little bit on the next slide about a commission agreement. So with a commission agreement, this is the general rule, is that good contracts make good collaborators, right? So I was working with an arts lawyer a couple of years ago about starting to draft up commission agreements in a kind of more serious way. And the great piece of advice he gave me was that so often when we're approaching, a contract, it's scary, is that we try to go so quickly into legal jargon. And very few of us are lawyers, probably none of us are lawyers, so we should not try to be lawyers by going into Latin legal words. Don't do it. Ask yourself the question, what do you want and what could go wrong, right? So, and understand that most of the points in a contract are negotiable. So let's look at some of the points to touch on in a contract, right? Oh, sorry, last bullet.
Sorry.
Go back one. Oh, you're fine. So length of the piece, when it's due, fees and copying. So does everyone here, by a show of hands, I'm just going to say what copying is, and if you already know it, just ignore me for the next 10 seconds. Copying is the fee that a composer or their person who does this for them charges to create and extract parts, and also to make the score look nice and clean and tidy. When we commission a piece of music, we generally never ask for parts because all four of us are on iPads off our score, so we don't ask that to be done. Copying is a totally separate thing from your actual writing, and so you should account for it in your commission fee, and you should charge for it. Whether you do that kind of internally or you lay it out as an entirely separate fee is up for you to decide, but do know that copying, as you all know, depending on the size of the ensemble that you're writing for, can be large, can be a lot of time. So account for it, because it is time you're spending. When
Also,
the piece is
just
going to
for copying the tax, just to get into the nitty gritty of legal, tax rates are different for copying fees. So if you can transfer some of the commission fee to the copying fee, that tends to work out better. I believe. It could be wrong. The others can correct me if I'm not right, but I think copying fees don't get taxed as much. Is that right?
I think you're right, because you actually froze on me.
Oh, okay.
But I trust that what you just said was correct, so that's great. And then the final thing we'll talk about is exclusivity. So exclusivity with a commission relates to how long a performer who commissioned the work can perform it or record it without anyone else doing either of those things. So for a performer like us, when we commission a piece of music, we typically take 1 year of exclusivity, meaning that for 1 calendar year from the day we premiere it, we're the only ones who can publicly perform that piece. And we typically take about 2 years of recording exclusivity, meaning that 2 years from the day we premiere the piece, we are the only ones who can make a master recording. So meaning that the album is not necessarily released yet, but we do have a finished, edited, polished professional recording, and we typically reserve the right to release it first. Next slide. How do I pay for this? How do I make money writing music? It's pretty fun. How do I pay for this? So keep in mind that commissions often come from multiple sources of funding, and we're going to talk about those various sources of funding in the ensuing slides. How to set your fee, we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about, again, what are those sources of funding. So let's talk a little bit about setting your fee. So for younger composers, I often encourage them to look at their expenses. So say, what is your rent every month? You know, how much do your groceries cost? You know, what is your general cost of living? How much time are you going to be spending writing this piece? And what percentage of your, kind of cost of living for that time period do you want this piece to cover? So do you want this to cover like 2 months of your rent, because for those 2 months it's going to be like your primary project? Do you want it to, maybe you're not going to charge as much because you know it's going to get a lot of performances? So if it's something like a wind ensemble piece that, talking about, I think we can all speak to this, that, you write a wind ensemble piece and like, wha-bam, the world of college band programs is yours for the taking. They tend to get performed more, or a string quartet or a woodwind quintet is going to be performed more, versus say that like piece for 8 tubas and solo snare drum that is probably going to get performed once. So maybe charge more for the piece for the 8 tubas and solo snare drum than you would for the string quartet that's going to get performed a lot. Think about the mileage of it. On the next slide, we'll talk about a few various prospect sources of funding. So what we look at for when we are commissioning new work and we're fundraising, there are kind of 3 areas that we go to for those funding. We look at a variety of grants that come from private charitable foundations and also government funding. We go to consortiums, which is kind of our real go-to. And consortiums usually consist of a presenter or a performer consortium. We'll talk about exactly what that is. And then individual gifts. We have some patrons who support our commission projects, patrons of the composer who have supported them in the past, crowdfunding, which I tend to not really like, and also event-based fundraising. But what I want to talk about mostly are consortiums, because from our perspective as a chamber music ensemble, this tends to be the preferred method of commissioning a piece of music. So with us, because we're a touring ensemble, sometimes we will have a handful of concert series or presenters collectively all commission a piece of work for us to play. And that's really great because A, we, the ensemble, are not paying for the piece, and also it kind of builds in a couple of performances. So if we have, say, 3 chamber music series who all collectively commission a piece of music for us, the composer gets those 3 performances automatically. We get the 3 gigs out of it. No one pay. The composer gets paid. We don't pay for it. Kind of everybody wins, right? It's fantastic. If you are assembling a consortium of performers, often a number of performers will come in together and chip in a little bit for a piece. So if you're writing, say, a solo percussion piece, this is actually quite common in the percussion world, where you will get, say, 10, even 50, like these can be really huge, percussionists all on board to chip in, $100 for your write a solo percussion piece, and then everyone gets this piece. You find that a lot of students will go in on these to have something to perform on their recitals, or professors at various institutions who teach percussion will go in, and you can create a lot of momentum for a piece, can get a lot of performances of a piece, and also just have everyone chip in just a tiny amount, and they get to be part of this really awesome big community that you've built around your work. Typically with orchestral commissions, several orchestras will go in on commissioning a new work. So prior to my work with Hub New Music, I used to do a little bit of management and PR for composers. And more often than not, when a client of mine had an orchestral commission, it was usually like 4 or 5 orchestras would each chip in an amount. And in that process, all the orchestras kind of like fight over who gets to premiere and who gets to record it and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really great because, again, the composer gets like 4 or 5 performances of an orchestral work, which, you know, we can all say is not super, super common. Does anyone have like questions thus far? Did anyone like type them or anything? No? Cool. So we're going to move to like Q&A in a little bit, but I do want to show you the chart on the next slide. So this chart, I'm just going to leave with this, is something to aspire to. It's pretty unrealistic. It's kind of crazy. But I come back to this chart not because I think that these are like the hard and fast monetary amounts that everyone should get paid all the time. I mean, but these are like things to strive for. And it's also, I think, nice to see kind of like the growth in relation to size of ensemble versus the length of the piece, to see how that kind of proportionally grows. That said, not to be pessimistic, but you are not going to get $100,000 every time you write an orchestral piece. You're also not going to get $0, but not everyone is writing checks for 6 figures for a 25-minute orchestral piece. And I hope that happens to you, but I think it's just good to see kind of like the curve of how that changes. And what's also really helpful is to look at below when you see the copying fees to see. Sorry, at the very bottom of this. This is giving an idea about the kind of relationship between commissioning costs and copying. Takama, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like most copyists actually charge hourly and not by minute of music.
Sorry, I was on mute. Probably. I don't think too many people use copyists at this point anymore. So I'm not too familiar. But just so you know, you can charge yourself as a copyist for your own music. So you can kind of arbitrarily set that copying fee whenever they ask for it. And that just gives you another way to pay yourself. Or use that money for some other, maybe pay the performer instead. Yeah, I think it's pretty arbitrary. Copying is often a part of the composing for us now. So it's really hard to separate what is the composition and what is the copying for many of us. So it's a little odd. It's for many of us, I think it's an outdated system. But I think it's a useful way to just get more money out of a commissioner if they're offering copying fees. Yeah.
Quick question here. Yep. I just found the link to the guide that this comes from. It's the old Meet the Composer Commissioning Music Guide. If you don't mind, I'm going to post it in the chat so everybody can access it. Is that okay?
Yep. Please.
I'm not sure about the US, but there is a union in the UK. Oh, that's great. I didn't know about that. Thank you. I'm gonna, could you send that to me? Because I would love to see that.
Yeah. I just posted it in the chat, so the link is there for everybody.
Oh, fantastic! I love that. I'm excited to read this. On the subject, not to beat a dead horse on copying, I remember in grad school, when I was in school, and I was an undergrad and a grad school, there were some composition students who also like had a little side hustle doing occasional copying work for kind of an older composer that can do it. So it'd be I know that one of my really good colleagues has, kind of hires 1 or 2 of her students to do copying for her if she doesn't do it. So it could be a good side hustle, make extra money. And also some grant applications will ask you for a copying fee, or they will partition out separate money for it. Like I know Chamber Music America, for example, does specifically allocate copying money as a separate thing. So it's good to like have it in your kind of consciousness when you're creating a budget for a project. So just on the next slide, there's just a list of some general grant opportunities that are just good to have as a resource. These are all really standard. A lot of people apply for these every year, but they're great because if you get one, then usually your whole piece is commissioned. As someone who has gotten a couple of these, I will say that it's really great when you get one because then you don't have to do any more fundraising because then it's just done. One thing that's not really, I don't really go, oh, I do, on the very, very bottom, the last point under foundations, regional funding options. This one often gets ignored and I think can be really viable if you're looking at local arts councils and local institutional grants. So for example, in Boston, we have a Boston Cultural Council that gives money to arts organizations in the city. And if you're doing a piece of music that is, say, with a local collaborator, or there's a big outreach component to it, or if there's some kind of community tie to the work, I always encourage composers I'm working with to look at some regionally tied funding, because if the piece is highlighting to a local artist, a local composer, or again, if there's kind of an outreach partner in the area, those applications tend to be more favorably reviewed by small arts councils and also like city government like grants, which I can answer any questions on that if you have questions about that for sure. And I think that concludes me talking at you across a screen and many time zones. And I would love questions because I think that's always the best part.
Yeah, I think the commissioning fee is, when you look at those numbers, it's a little daunting, especially when your collaborators are currently students who are can't afford to pay this sort of fee. So what would you recommend, especially when we're still in school and your collaborators are also broke?
Yes. Okay. So everyone in this industry have no money. So just like everyone is broke. Like the Metropolitan Opera is also broke. Like no one has cash. But when you are young, when you're all in school, like, you know, when you're forming those relationships with performers while you're a student, which is the time to do it because those performers that you work with now are going to be the ones who are going to advocate for you throughout your whole career. And so things to think about when your performers are really broke, like all of us, is that there are also non-monetary forms of compensation that are great when you're a student that can actually be more valuable than money. Some of those are included, but are not limited to, high quality recording. So if you are a student and say you're applying for other programs or summer festivals or fellowships or other funding sources and whatnot, having a high quality recording, as we all know, can be an invaluable resource. So say when you're a student and a performer friend wants you to write a piece. We're going to give you like 10 performances of it.
Mike, yeah. You cut out for like past 20 seconds or so. So.
Oh, okay. Did we get the good recording part?
Just started that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow, I talk really fast. I did like a whole point in 20 seconds. So when you are in school, you know, when we're applying for, say, post-grad or grant opportunities or fellowship programs or summer festivals, having a high quality recording of your work can be absolutely invaluable, right? And so say you're in school and your friend wants you to read for them for their grad recital. And they promise they're going to give you like a professional, high quality recording and it's going to be great. You can use it however you want, right? That, you know, when you're younger, when you're a student and you're kind of trying to kind of make your path, that recording can be absolutely invaluable. It can be something that can open a lot of doors to go to summer programs, another fellowship, to get into grad school. And so if you are all kind of students and say your student friend doesn't have a lot of money but can give you that, that's a really great resource. Another form of, say, non-monetary compensation is the number of performances that the performer is going to give. So say you have an ensemble that doesn't have a whole lot of money to give, but they're going to give you like 10 performances of your piece, and they're going to do it, you know, when they're touring or when they're concertizing, wherever. So talk about, did you ever talk about like ASCAP BMI stuff, that whole thing?
I don't think we've talked about it recently.
Okay, so if you are, you know, a member of ASCAP and or probably, I think it's one or the other, or a BMI, when you have performances of your work, there comes a time of the year when you report all of your performances that you've had to ASCAP and BMI. And I always know when that time of the year is because every composer I've ever worked with suddenly asks me for every time I've ever played their music ever, and I have to give it to them within 3 hours. So be courteous when you're asking for this. Basically, you report every performance, the date and the location of that performance of that piece. Usually you have to submit a program from the concert to ASCAP or BMI, and they give you a little bit of money for it, you know, depending on how long and how large the piece is. So if you write like a 30-minute quartet that an ensemble tours and plays it 30 times, you might get like a pretty decent, you know, nice little chunk of change in the mail from ASCAP BMI after you report all those performances. So when an ensemble is touring your music, make sure you copy of every program from every performance that they give, and try to, you know, get them as they happen so you don't bombard an ensemble asking for like 50 concert programs the day before they're due. Does that kind of answer the question about, you know, non-monetary sources of support?
Right. And it's always good to curry favors so that they always feel like they owe you something, instead of like, as composers, you always feel like your performers are doing you a big favor by playing your pieces. And there are things you can do as composers, or skills that you might have that allow you to get them to feel like they owe you to help you out a little bit. So if you have skills in recording or editing other performers, that can be a really useful skill that the performers are coveting. So they'll come to you to record their own concerts or things like that. And that can be a good way to open new doors for future collaborations. If you're teaching theory, you can tutor a performer in ear training or something like that, and they feel like, oh, I need to help you out more.
Just to add to that, I think also, if you can give of your skills as a performer, if you're a good performer, that's really a really good in, especially if you're a student who is a good pianist and you accompany somebody on their recital, they're going to be a whole lot more likely to want to play your music if you're helping them out in that sense as well. So, and in addition to that, you also get to know them musically as well. So it's a win-win.
I'm currently doing a recital program with my composer pianist friend, and I'm playing one of his pieces. Yes, living proof. We also do a lot of composer-performer collaborations in my group. For example, like when we were supposed to be out there with Kojiro, the shakuhachi player, also wrote a piece on the program that we toured with him. So composer-performer collaborations are awesome. Do them. Anything else?
Yeah.
There are no dumb questions, I promise.
Going back to maybe your first slide, what would you say the mission of your ensemble is? Just to clarify.
I just wrote a big long grant, so I've got this one right here. So as an ensemble, our mission is in 5 parts. See if I can do this. The first part of our mission is to commission and perform works that reflect the kind of genre diversity of our musical landscape. So we're commissioning a whole wide variety of music. We record that music on multiple platforms. We do a lot of educational work, and we try to do a lot of outreach work to enhance the performance experience. Oh, the first point is to perform at a high level. Duh. Okay, so those are the 5. I can send you the actual mission statement that is and has earned us money before.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question. Hi, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm Rafael.
Hi, Rafael.
Michael, hi. Regarding the interest of an ensemble, it's very often the ensembles are interested to have like very popular composers that they commission. So like this helps also the ensembles to promote themselves. And just following this path, I'm just wondering, what do you think about the social media influence on this aspect nowadays, or if you see something different in the future, like a composer that gets popular in social media and then
Yeah.
is interested.
So this is a good point to bring up, because I am not much of a social media person, except anyone who's friends with me on Facebook. You can see that today I posted a 38-second clip of me playing the viola very poorly. So getting popular on social media, which is not necessarily a good thing. There are people who gain bad reputations from tweeting too much. With social media, I think it's a great tool in order to, again, tell stories, to give an idea or an inside look about what you're doing as a composer. I will say that I haven't. Never have I ever followed a composer's Twitter feed so actively that I was compelled to commission them. Usually the social media presence kind of reinforces a relationship I have already, or maybe it kind of like sparks an interest that I then go to their website and listen to all their recordings, and then I'm interested. But I can say that social media is really good with kind of reinforcing existing relationships and not necessarily creating new ones in a way that are substantial that would lead to a commission. So I tend to always favor like in-person, really humanizing interactions. That said, it's important to have a good social media presence for something that with profiles that are, again, telling stories, showing your personality as an artist, but use your best judgment with not like over posting, because that can also get kind of tedious and annoying. But with the idea of like social networking and not digital platforms, we are all essentially in this industry like 7 degrees of separation away from each other, like that Kevin Bacon game. So you probably know through someone else, basically everyone in our musical community. So that kind of networking is way more powerful than just like getting a lot of Instagram likes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Michael, thank you.
Okay, great. Talk about my friends. You love me.
I guess I going back to your my question about your mission statement, I forgot to mention that like you guys don't perform a lot of music every year. You play a few pieces a number of times.
Yeah,
which is a little bit different.
I thought you were about to say we don't perform a lot of new music, and it was like
that's not what I meant. Yeah.
That one might be false. No, we the model of our organization, which is the model of most ensembles, is that we have a very small handful of repertoire that we play each year. We normally play no more than 3 recital programs a season. So it kind of amounts to we're normally not playing more than like 2 hours of music per season. So it winds up being like 6 or 7 pieces that we're playing. So what we do is when we commission a piece of music, we tend to commission it and we really live with it for a long time. So we'll tour the same piece and perform it many times over the course of a season, because we like to get to know the music. We like to feel comfortable and feel like we're creating a kind of definitive interpretation of the music. And we also just like extended relationships with our composer friends, like Takuma, our friends. But yeah, so when we commission a piece, God, we'll play it dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen times, depending on, you know, how large the piece is.
So that's very enticing for a composer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've played a lot of wavelengths, Takuma, and there are many more to come.
Hopefully. Yep.
Yes. I have a question. What are some, I have a question. What are some places to look to help break into the market, particularly if you want to specialize in film and video game composition? Where do you start? Oh my God, I wish Chad was here. He could answer this, because I don't work in the film or video game industry. But what I do know, especially with video games, there are a lot of conferences, like, and there are special programs in certain schools. Like I know Berkeley, I think, has specifically like a film scoring and video game music program. So I feel like a lot of people get their footing that way, or they go to like video game music conferences, or they go to like film festival type things. I am more than happy to, because I do not have a particularly good answer to that question, because I'm mostly in the concert music world. But I do have some colleagues who are very active in film that I'd be happy to connect you with through Takuma.
Yeah, we might be able to try to get some composer like Chad.
Chad.
Yeah,
Chad just won an Oscar. I mean, not like Chad, but his film that he wrote music for won an Oscar, and he went to the Oscars.
So yeah, maybe we can get him on Zoom sometime later this semester. He helped. Well, he organized a trip. He put us in touch, actually. Chad.
Takuma, we know each other because of Chad Hannon.
Chad, yes. So, and he composed the music for the documentary American Factory.
He did.
On Netflix.
Brilliant.
So
it's insane.
check it out.
He won an Oscar.
Yeah. So maybe that might be a good idea. So I'll get in touch with him, see if he's interested or has some time to do this. All right, I think we're out of time. So
I mean, what am I doing? If anyone wants to stick around and has some more lingering questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's just going to keep me from like going in my kitchen and eating more, which I have not stopped doing since all this quarantine business.
Okay. That's some technical difficulties.
All right.
They agree.
Well, you can stick around with Mike if you want, but we'll plan on having another session next Thursday. So not this coming Thursday, but next Thursday, April 1st or 2nd, with Kojiro, and he's taking a look at many of your shakuhachi parts, and he'll be kind of walking through them one by one. So that'll be really useful. And once the recording session is set up sometime, hopefully not too far in the future.
We're aiming for May. If California is working, then it's functional, then May it is. If it's not functional, we'll do it after. It's gonna happen. You have my word through Zoom.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And I think, well, Takuma, you obviously have my contact information. So if any questions pop up, after this Zoom call is over, please feel free to get in touch with me or get in touch with the ensemble. We're always here to be a resource, either in person or digitally in whatever capacity. So questions, always feel free to send them over.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have a great rest of your semester. Hang in there. Stay strong. Stay healthy.
Stay healthy. Wash your hands.
Stay healthy. Social distance.
Don't touch your face.
Don't touch your face either. It's bad. And wash your hands a lot. Sound like
Okay, so
Grandma. Bye, everyone. I'll talk to you. Hopefully, talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
batch print like on a daily basis for all of the